Jonathan Keith joining us live on the Coalition. Folks, if you listened to us in our prior incarnation, you know that Jonathan called in several times as a candidate for the Senate, if you will, of the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. A political activist, a lover of liberty, a devotee, if you will, of Ron Paul, and someone who is constantly the subject of my attempts to perform some type of conversion. Yeah. Jonathan, welcome for the first time to the Go Local Live Media Center, broadcasting here at 90 Darn Street. First of all, what do you think of the...
I think it's awesome. I actually used to live right down the street here.
Really?
On Westminster.
Excellent.
For a couple of years, we used to, this used to be our stomping ground, my wife and I, when we first started, moved in together when we were first dating. And it brings back a lot of old memories.
It's a quiet evening here in Providence after PVD Fest. And by the way, next week is Pride, the Rhode Island Pride celebration, and we're working on some very special programming for that next week, as has been our tradition over the few years that the Coalition has been in business. But let's get right down to it. You lost in a hard-fought campaign. How many pairs of shoes did you go through?
I went through 3 pairs of shoes.
3 pairs of shoes.
Yep.
You met or stopped at literally every house in a senatorial district.
Yes, twice.
Twice.
Wow.
Yep. How many? I mean, the House of Representatives, by definition, is a much smaller district. How big is in your Senate district?
So, if my memory serves me right, the last numbers I remember were 22,000 lived there. Mm-hmm. About 20,000 registered voters, mm-hmm. and the last election, I believe 13,500 actually got out to vote, which is a high percentage for Rhode Island in general.
Now, you ran as a Republican,
yes.
And in the spirit of full disclosure here, you ran against Senator Hannah Gallo.
Yes.
And what if you will, what positions does she hold in Rhode Island Senate?
So she's the chairwoman of the Education Oversight Committee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's about, I think, the only position she holds. After 19 years of being in office, that's the only one.
Right.
But
and that does what for your district?
Nothing.
Okay.
It gives a lot of money to colleges in Rhode Island, but nothing specifically for the district.
Right. So, based on her position as the senator for the district that her Senate district encompasses, Representative Lancia's district, is she elected to be the individual who would submit the companion bill?
Again, like Representative Lancia said, it wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
It's a statewide issue, although we do carry the biggest burden in Cranston.
Mm-hmm.
So it is in her specific district. So I would imagine that she should take interest in the issue directly. Yes.
Okay. And so it's set out there. Now, again, I want to emphasize this appears to be a two-pronged approach. Number one, you've got enabling legislation so that you can force some level of control, because ultimately individual negotiation words were lost somewhere in the sauce, as we say.
Right.
And at the same time, there's a willingness to address the underlying social issues involved in this. So you've got two opportunities here to profoundly impact the lives of the most vulnerable. And this again, my words, you've got the most vulnerable in one sense, of course, are the young people who live in the affected areas.
Right.
You've also got people who, despite being flawed and in many cases broken,
right.
There's a level of vulnerability, if you're a caring individual, that you have to ascribe to people who perform and engage in some of the worst behavior imaginable.
Right.
So you've got two distinct communities at high levels of risk.
Right.
You've got a screaming need from within the community, a recognition almost on a daily basis that you've got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You clearly have the wherewithal within state government to address this, if one chooses to.
Right.
What has been Senator Gallo's response?
So Senator Gallo has been absent since day one. In 2012, when they had the meeting, she wasn't there. Mm-hmm. When an article came out about this, describing what was going on and the lying of the inflated numbers, mm-hmm. She never replied to it. She never, came out against it. She has literally done nothing to try to resolve this issue, and it wasn't until Representative Lancia put the legislation in, did legislation ever try to be, at the city level, they tried. but the city can only do so much. It has
Right.
to be a statewide, it's a
This-
state-funded building. It's got to be a state, resolution.
And we also need, as a state, to recognize the problem and take a comprehensive approach to it.
Right.
This is not something, I mean, the patchwork, day-to-day, let's kind of wing it, hasn't worked
well,
for anybody.
and since 2012, we have kind of sat back and let the gentleman's agreement play out.
Mm-hmm.
And where has it gotten us? The last number I just got today was 43 registered sex offenders at one address. 43. Now, how is that fair to the other individuals that haven't committed that crime,
Mm-hmm.
that are homeless that live there?
Right.
Now they have to put up with this as well. So they're vulnerable as well. And if you listen and you talk to the individuals that work there and that go there, the sex offenders actually isolate themselves within the building. They go off into a corner, they sit around, they don't communicate, they don't interact with anyone else. It's just that little core niche group. And what do you think they're talking about? I mean, you've got to really, put this in perspective.
So there's clearly not enough security. And we're also lacking in this, I shall ask you, are we lacking any clear intervention to try and somehow heal these people?
Well, yes, absolutely. The state has done a terrible job on reintegrating these individuals back into society.
And which, by the way, has lent them, in fact, to being homeless.
Precisely. I mean, if you think about if your family member had committed a crime like that, it's hard to accept them back into the family.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're kicked out of jail because they've served their sentence. They're free. They're free to society. They've been,
Right.
forgiven for all their sins, so to speak, as far as the law is concerned. But where do they go? What do they do? There's nothing for them. There's no transition for them.
Right.
They walk on the
And-
street and they check into the homeless shelter.
And it's so important for folks who engage in that kind of grotesque level of criminality to remove themselves somehow from the environment
Right.
that, I won't say led them to it, but clearly was a contributing factor.
Right. And to go back a little bit, I think that they do have very good oversight in Cranston.
Mhm.
As far as the police have done a terrific job keeping track of all these
Right.
individuals, and that's why we haven't had an incident. But with a number of 43,
It's a statistical issue.
it's bound to happen. And as Lancia said before, it takes one,
Right.
and that's it. I mean, you're talking about a person's life being completely destroyed because we were reactive instead of proactive.
Right. And ultimately, as in so many cases in this state, rather than take a statewide approach to everything, we draw, and it can be any one of a number of issues. We drop this bomb on one focused area
Right.
and just hope nothing goes wrong.
Right. And I was told by Colonel Winquist today that the reason why the number has spiked in Cranston was because the radius was enlarged for where sex offenders could live in close to playground schools, daycares, facilities like that, that a lot of the individuals from Providence did move down to Cranston. We're compassionate people. We're not going to just kick them out and say they need to go back to Providence. We're very close to the numbers that Providence has. We have 184 registered sex offenders in Cranston, and Providence has 220.
Right.
So we're not trying to push them back in, but this is a statewide issue that we are taking a very large burden of, and
Right.
so is Providence. So it's not just Senate District 27 or Representative District 16. This is a statewide issue,
Right.
and it needs to be addressed and it needs to be shared throughout the state.
Right, and in a sense, the high costs of maintaining that situation then accrue directly to the citizens of Providence and the citizens
Right.
of Cranston.
Yes.
Whereas other communities, as is so often the case in so many different issues, just to kind of get to skate,
Right.
for lack of a better term.
Right.
So now you're up against you, Representative Lancia, the folks who collaborated in this effort, you're up against two real deadlines because ultimately there's the legislative deadline and then there's also the deadline within which to essentially budget for next year.
Right.
Any of the remedial efforts, any attempts to ameliorate the situation, you're up against the wall in both.
Right, yes, absolutely. And it didn't have to be that way. So the legislation from the House side was passed on Rhode Island Independence Day, of all days, May 4th,
Mhm.
and then it was switched over to the Senate on May 11th. It was introduced to state judiciary, where it has sat. Now, why has it sat? Why have other issues taken precedence over that?
Right.
And I mean, I have to go out on a ledge here and suspect that maybe the safety of the community isn't a top priority to Senator Gallo, and that's why it's sitting back. Or, even worse case, I mean, maybe it's going to be used as leverage during the budget season. And that's not right. I mean, you're talking about the safety of individuals and the safety of children in
Right.
your community. It's not a point of leverage. It's doing the right thing. It's trying to make Rhode Island a better place and a safer community for all families to live in. I don't see how that is going to be, how you can take something like that and try to politicize it and try to use it to leverage your agenda or to try to get something through on the House. And it almost has become the fact that the bipartisanship on the legislation has turned out to be a negative because it has a Republican's name as the primary sponsor, and the Speaker helped assist it through. So you've got the bipartisan. How much is that worth to the Speaker? And I'm hypothesizing.
No, and I want to make it very clear too. This is not some political hot potato that you just grab.
Right.
You've been intimately involved in this issue and working on this issue for how long?
It's been over a year now. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And
Despite the fact that you are not an elected
right.
representative.
And that's just me. There have been other. I mean, you have Mayor Fung is in support of this. Colonel Winquist is in support of this. Councilman Ward 6 Michael Favicchio is in support of this. The council sent a resolution to the state. It's gone so far, but yet one elected official hasn't done their job. One.
Right. Do you have a message for Senator Gallo?
Pass the bill. Pass it. Just pass the bill. It's your bill. You put it in with only one other senator signing on to it, which is ironic as well. I don't know why it wasn't put out for other senators to co-sponsor.
Do you know who the other senator was? Or?
It was Senator Lombardi. Yes. Okay. So they're both Cranstonian senators. So maybe that was the reason behind it. But I was actually speaking with 3 other senators last night that would have loved the opportunity to co-sponsor this, and it would have made it a bipartisan bill on the Senate side.
What objections do you see to this from outside of the legislative committee? Where has fault been found with this?
The fault would be, what do you do with the individuals once they are told they're no longer allowed to be at that facility?
Right.
And I understand that, and that's a larger conversation that needs to happen. But in order for that conversation to occur, you need to take the first step.
And that's more of a policy conversation. You
Right.
can't
Exactly.
You can't legislate. Let's try as hard as we may here in Little Rhodey. You can't legislate everything, can you?
Right. No, not absolutely not.
Right.
And the other thing too is with that comes the financial burden, and that's why we were trying to get it passed before the budget. We had a huge effort to get it passed. Senator Gallo never made it to one of the forums, but she sent somebody on her behalf, and the individual she sent on her behalf said that she was going to put the companion bill in, and that was it. That was the last forum we had. Then she waited until the House version passed, and then she mirrored the version in the Senate, and now she sat on it for a month. Why? I'd like to know why.
There are deadlines approaching?
The budget, according to Lancia, is going to be released on Tuesday. Hopefully it's pushed off to Wednesday. They have a day to get it through. They're going to start going through that with a fine-tooth comb, and that's going to take precedence over every other piece of legislation.
As we say, that will take all the oxygen out of the room.
Right.
How can folks who listen to this now or listen to it in the near future, how can folks get a hold and apply some pressure?
Call Senator Gallo. Email her. Her contact is on the Rhode Island's website. As a legislator, as senator, you go down, Cranston, District 27, Senator Hannah Gallo, and you just get her information. You reach out to her, email her, call her. I intend to go to her house and have a discussion with her tomorrow. Hopefully she's home. In all honesty, I want to ask her to please pass the legislation, and respectfully and kindly. But ask her the question.
And to your credit, you ran a high-level campaign.
Yes.
It was orientated.
Yes, very much so.
Issues oriented.
Very much so. And those issues are still out there. Nothing's been done to take them away either. They've only gotten worse. They've only compounded since then.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, I thank you for coming in tonight.
No, thank you for having me.
Don't be a stranger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Continue to let us know about the progress of this. Again, we'll be taking this and give you an opportunity to extend to the senator a video greeting, should she not be home, and a warm, happy hi hello from the coalition, and also the eminently respectful Representative Lancia,
yes,
who continues to impress me by just being a caring guy.
He is absolutely wonderful.
He's exactly what you say.
Right.
There's
yes.
I'd only met him once before tonight briefly. There's no artifice there. There's no.
He's as genuine as you get. He really is.
As they say, the real deal.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, so are you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Folks, you've been listening to the Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network, broadcasting live here in the city we love, the mean streets, the naked city with 1,000 stories. 90 Dorrance Street, I'm sorry, 90 Way Bosset Street, mental slip again tonight, 90 Way Bosset Street. We'll be broadcasting every Friday night from 6 to 9 o'clock. CoalitionRadio.us, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. As always, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and our special nonpartisan apolitical 38 studio feed at 38 Stadium at Pawtucket is Home, where we'll give you the latest and the greatest. I stand here in the shadow of literally the crumbling Superman building. I listen to tales of woe like this evening, and yet I look around and I embrace all that is wonderful about Rhode Island. And the simple question is, as always, why does it have to be this way? I don't get it. We're blessed here. There are so many things that we can do on such a simple base level to make things better for people here. Those people who are the weakest, the frailest among us on so many different levels. There's clearly so many people who care, who take it personally.